I call the honourable member for Reid.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Last week, Essential Polling polled Australian perception of politicians. And I don't know if it surprised you, Deputy Speaker, but it didn't surprise me that 90% of Australians don't hold us in high regard. And I thought this afternoon, when today this deal was announced and I was asked to speak on this bill, I thought I'd come down and have a chat to the House about this bill, because this is, in 18 months, one of the rare times that I've actually seen bipartisanship. And I got here early and I've listened to each of the speeches from the Treasurer through the Shadow Treasurer, the member for Grayndler and the member for Perth. And I get why people aren't thinking too highly of us at the moment, Deputy Speaker. In a moment of supposed bipartisanship, we have the opposition standing up and rebadging this as a position of their own. And some of the quotes, and I've written them down because I found them quite hard to comprehend. But the member for McMahon, when interjecting with the Assistant Minister for Defence, quoting the fact that we had doubled the budget, and when the Minister rightfully pointed out that their record wasn't too flash, his quote was, "Forget about that," i.e. up until PFO, from 2007 to 2013, forget about that. The problem is we can't. And then he went on to say difficult decisions are needed. I know the Assistant Minister for Infrastructure agrees with me on this. We've been trying to make them for 18 to 19 months. Difficult decisions are needed. And take the partisanship out of this. If you look at our last 4 years' budgets, what was proposed and what was delivered. In 2011-12, a budget deficit of $22.6 billion was proposed, forecast. The actual was $43.4 billion, double. 2012-13, the budget forecast was $1.5 billion. The actual was $18.8 billion, out by a factor of 15 or so about. 2013-14, the proposed was $18 billion, the actual was $48 billion. And this year, 14-15, the proposed $17 billion, actual $35 billion. Deputy Speaker, we've got financial problems in this country. They are structural. And there's a news flash for a bloke that doesn't come from a political background to the Shadow Treasurer. Yes, difficult decisions are needed. At the moment, in the budget in reply speech from the Leader of the Opposition, there is a $57 billion black hole in what was said on the night. The Shadow Foreign Minister stood up and wants— I'll get there. The Shadow Foreign Minister stood up and wants to reinstate $16 billion worth of foreign aid spending. And then in the last 2 days' question time, we've had and we've had it for the last 18 or 19 months, the allegation that we have cut $80 billion out of health and education. We want to spend $80 billion less than the previous government forecast over a 10-year period, in a time of politics where the traditional 4-year forward estimates and budgeting process morphed into anything that cost a lot of money and we couldn't fund. We moved into year 5 to 10. That doesn't cut the mustard, and the results all the way through, up to and including ours, the member for Perth, show you why. And that is what this House needs to get fair income and address. This is, and I am pleased that this is a bipartisan approach this afternoon, and we need more of it. I note with interest the member for Port Adelaide on the doors this morning, when questioned about the $80 billion supposed cut, which is in fact $80 billion extra the opposition want to spend, when they get the question, will you pay that money? For the first time ever this morning, the member for Port Adelaide actually balked. He actually balked. Why? Because, and the myth of this was exposed in question time so aptly by the Prime Minister, and the member for Perth mentioned local governments. They are part of the trifecta. We have a structural budget deficit, Deputy Speaker, and what we need to be considering as a parliament now is tax reform and federation reform. And the two taxes in the last 6 months that have been proposed by those opposite add to $23 billion over 10 years again, not 4. $23 billion. That's not going to change whatever the $57 billion black hole over 4 years, as of the budget and reply speech, spread out to 10 is, and the $96 billion in school, education and foreign aid spending that those opposite are still attempting to bash us about on a daily basis. We need considered tax and federation reform. And, Deputy Speaker, they do not happen in isolation. The member for Perth is right. Local government is an important arm of government. They collected $14 billion last year across Australia in rates revenue. State government is an important level of government. Between stamp duty, land tax, payroll tax and mining royalties, they received $91 billion worth of revenue last year. All three are operating in the same space on a day-in and day-out basis. We need to have the discussion about who does what and who pays for what. The problem we have in this place, Deputy Speaker, and the reason why 90% of Australians are at present holding us in such low esteem is that when you attempt to have this conversation, and the IGR, the Intergenerational Report, belled the cat, when you try and have this conversation, a conversation that will affect our children and grandchildren, as the member for Wannon said, over the next 40 years, both sides of politics default to a wedge position and scare campaigns, and both are duplicit in it. We need a better quality of debate. The underlying number in the Intergenerational Report, which scares the living daylights out of me, is that over the next 40 years, in the age bracket of 65 plus in this country, our population will grow at 3 times the speed of the growth in our 0 to 64 age category. Here's a newsflash, Deputy Speaker. I don't know if you've thought it this far through, but the 0 to 64 age bracket are our taxpayers. The 65 and over are our tax receivers. We have got structural issues. We are, today, doing something in a small way about it. There needs to be more bipartisanship. There needs to be serious federation reform. There needs to be serious tax reform, less wedge politics and less scare campaigns for the sake of our children and the sake of our grandchildren. Thank you.